No matter where you live in the world, even Ohio, our oceans matter. So today, I hope you will join us because what we're going to do with Paola is we're going to talk about our impact on the environment and how you can green your routine with your family, and how there's 5 things she's really going to share that you can do as a family to minimize your carbon footprint in the world. So please join us because you're going to love this information. My name is Cheryl Bassett. I'm founder of Unstoppable Connections, international bestseller, and creator of the award-winning Unstoppable Family Meeting Toolkit. I am also the host of the show, Kitchen Table Conversations, as part of the Edge Network, Global One, and the Sign Network. Now, families do get to tap into my 4 gifts and what I share, which is my heartbeat. It's how to connect families around the kitchen table in a way where everybody feels heard and respected and supported and celebrated in that process. If you would like to learn more about the work that I do for connecting families, you can go to unstoppableconnections.com. And if you have an idea for this show or want to be on the show, you can actually reach out to me at kitchentableconversations.com. Now, what I love to do is set an intention for this show. This show really is designed to cover the fun stuff to the tough stuff and everything in between. It's all designed to ignite conversations, to strengthen the family, and to create a positive ripple out into the world. How appropriate today that we're going to talk about oceans and how we get to create that ripple. So what I love to do is to tap into one of the gifts that I do get to share, which is the 4th gift, which is the gift of love, and how we unwrap the gift of love by choosing to celebrate ourselves and others. It's with that open heart, open mind, and that true celebration that I love to come to every show, celebrating the person who came here today with us to share her heart, her expertise, and her passion for what she brings into the world. So before I bring her on, let me just tell you a little bit about her. Paola Espitia, I think I did that right, is creating a ripple of change, how appropriate, for a better, bluer future. For 2 decades, she has been studying coastal ecosystems as a marine scientist. When she realized that she could make an even bigger impact for the ocean through storytelling, she became a speaker at Sea Cruising, over 17,500 nautical miles, educating thousands of people about the ocean and how to conserve her. She continues to inspire stewardship through her live interview show, Conversations with Paola, and we're going to tell you how you can find her show and learn more. And together with her husband, Aponte, hopefully I said that right, Aponte, she is amplifying the voices of responsible leaders in the outdoor, adventure, and wellness sectors through her media agency, Ola'pi Creative. However, her biggest contribution, and I remember when she was actually pregnant, but now her biggest contribution towards a better, bluer future is raising her outdoor loving son and bringing him into the same world that she lives in. So without any more delay, because I just really want you to get to meet Paola, let's bring her on. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited.
I am very excited. This is one of those topics that was sort of on my ever since I met you. Like, I'm just like, I got to have her on the show because I just feel like this is sometimes information that doesn't get out. And I just feel like what a beautiful conversation for families to have. So I'm really excited about you getting to be here today. Let me ask you though, just because I love to start every show, where does your passion, like what started your journey to do what it is that you do?
Whew. I must have been born into it. I like to say that I was a water baby, even though I was born in the Andes Mountains of Colombia. My mom has a story where she says she was bathing me in a bucket. I was just a few months old, and she asked me to hang on to the sides as she turned around to grab a towel. And when she turned back around, to her horror, I was underwater. But I came popping out, smiling and laughing. And I think that was my first discovery of my love of water. And, really ever since, my life has truly been about finding more water. I was a competitive swimmer growing up. I ran into the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau, reruns of that show when I was like 8 years old. And then that was when, really the underwater world opened up for me. And the concept of finding or falling into a career that was marine science, that really opened up to my eyes to that. And, I could just imagine that this was a job where I could live in my bathing suit all day long and be underwater and swimming around with a whole bunch of animals, studying them and also learning how to protect them. And so I was sold. I was sold at a very young age.
That's great. So you always knew that you were going to be probably like a marine scientist or do something related to the oceans.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I love that when you kind of like, you just know, you just like, it's like the reason you're here.
Yeah, and I can say I was really lucky to have very supportive parents as well. I think they saw that interest I had, that curiosity I had for water at a very young age, and so they were really integral in nurturing that curiosity. And so they would help me get into volunteer at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. I grew up in Maryland area, so that was an amazing place to spend my adolescence. Disappear away from my parents at the aquarium. It really was, with their support and their guidance. And then, really getting this kind of exposure to see what kinds of fields existed out there. I think that's a big missing part that we see too, that we're starting to see more of is the interest in STEAM, which is the science, technology, engineering, art, and math fields has been lacking for a long time. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we just didn't have really good role models. We didn't see people in those careers. And, like I said, at 8 years old, my idol was a 65-year-old Frenchman. So I'm really happy to see the field is diversifying and that there's a lot more opportunities for young people who have this kind of interest in nature to actually see and experience what it would be like to get into those fields early on.
That's so cool. So there's really are there shows on that? I mean, I remember Jacques Cousteau. I don't know if we're dating ourselves. We probably are. I'm definitely dating me because I'm way older than you, but just like, are there shows out now that actually do some of that deep discovery that Jacques Cousteau does or did, I should say? Well,
right. I mean, the Discovery Channel, a number of those shows are covering it. But even, if we look back at cartoons, now that I do have a little one, he's only 13 months, but now I'm getting exposed to what cartoons exist. And of course, Dora the Explorer. That is a woman, a female character of color, a Latina, who's out there in the world, exploring in the same sense, in the same way that Jacques Cousteau did. That is a really neat example. And, I'm personally friends with female science communicators. I'm actually interviewing my friend Danny Washington coming up, where she leads a PBS show all about science exploration. Right. And she, too, is a female of color who doesn't look like the white older gentleman of our science. So it definitely is changing.
It's changing. It's shifting. I love that. Yeah. And I feel like, and that's part of what this is about. How do we bring that awareness? Because I feel like sometimes people don't think about that. Like they might think about it, but they don't know what to do, which we're going to talk about today, or they really wouldn't know how to get involved. So maybe we can even touch on to that. But it sounds like some of the things is really to plug into some of these things that are out there and see if your kids actually have a passion for some of these things that you might not be aware of, but by exposing them to it. So, let's kind of just dive right in. I know one of the questions that you had said to go ahead and ask was just like, why is the ocean important? Seems like a big, broad question, but a really important one.
Absolutely. The ocean is a very deep topic. I can go on. I know this is going to be a long interview if I keep going. No, so the ocean is so incredibly important to our everyday lives. I mean, to humanity. If we think about it, I like to use this as my example. This is actually what our planet looks like from space. We are a blue planet. We're actually covered 70% by water, which in reality, maybe rather than being called planet Earth, we should be called planet Ocean. So because we have so much water on our planet, that water actually helps to provide us with 50% of the oxygen that we breathe. That comes from the ocean. The ocean regulates our climate and controls our weather patterns. Because there's so much water on our planet, it actually helps to distribute the heat around the equator up into the poles. And so that's how the ocean controls our weather. The ocean actually helps to remove about 50% of the carbon dioxide that's in our atmosphere. The ocean, of course, provides us with food, with medicines. A lot of people actually aren't aware that a lot of the medicines that we see now that are treating cancers, even Alzheimer's, are actually coming from marine sponges. So we're learning more about the medicines that come off of coral reefs, which we took in the rainforests of the sea. So we're learning a lot about the medicines that are coming from our oceans. And of course, at the end of the day, water gives us life. And how lucky are we to be on this incredible planet that gives us life? And that, just talking about those features, that's just the environmental benefits of the ocean. I always like to describe these benefits in 3 different categories. So we have the environmental benefits of the ocean that we just went over, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. We have economic benefits of the ocean. I mean, we get something like $282 billion a year comes from ocean resources, whether it's through the seafood that we're eating, recreation opportunities, even, commerce. 76% of all U.S. trade involves the water in some form. And, I can say that while I was in graduate school, it was so fascinating because right out of my office window was for Everglades. So every single day I would watch commerce moving in and out.
Yeah.
The Chiquita banana ship come cruising in, watching it got offloaded and then being transported behind the port to the airport, where then it's being flown somewhere else, across the country. It was amazing to see that kind of commerce and work. And it's because of the ocean that is able to happen. And so those are just some of the economic benefits of water and of the ocean. But I think my favorite feature about the ocean that is only now starting to become discussed about, especially in the scientific community, are the emotional benefits of the ocean. And so there's a whole new field of science that combines both neuroscience with conservation science to allow us to look to see exactly what is it that the ocean benefits us? How does it benefit us? And we're seeing that when we're swimming, when we're kayaking, even just walking along the beach or sitting by the fountain, we see that there's actual physical and chemical changes that happen to our brains and our bodies that allow us to relax. It allows us to, our breath rate drops, our heart rate drops, our blood pressure drops. We have less cortisol, the stress hormone, in our systems when we're around water. We're much more present. And, at the end of the day, we become very happy and, just in a really great mind state, our blue mind state, when we're around water. So, beyond the ecological and economic benefits of the ocean, this new feature about the emotional benefits of the ocean is a really exciting, it's a really exciting piece of wellness that we're starting to discover. And I think especially now with COVID, it really is an even more important element that we start recognizing that there is this major wellness benefit to the ocean.
Oh, that's so cool. So I have to admit, I'm in Ohio, no ocean close, right? I know how amazing I feel when I get to go to the ocean, right? And be a part of it and walk the beach and feel connected, right? And it's all about just being connected, like taking off your shoes, right? And just being totally connected to Earth in general. And then obviously the ocean on top of it. But I was glad to hear you say that I could sit by a fountain and that would be something. Because we do have fountains in Ohio.
Even if we think about, the inland waterways, streams and rivers, there's such an auditory piece to that. Really by being outside in nature, we're also very much reconnecting to our senses. And that becomes a really big deal in our modern lifestyle, because otherwise, we're constantly touching artificial surfaces. We're breathing in artificial air conditioning. We are, the perfumes of our cleaners are made to mimic pine trees, what nature is supposed to smell like. But, the point is that we get outside and even just sitting and listening to a babbling brook, or like you said, putting your feet in that cool water. Those are very much sensory pieces that bring us back to present and help remind us that there's a bigger world at play.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. The emotional is definitely not something I've heard a lot about until actually a little bit recently, right? And just that connection. So I think that's really great to bring to awareness. So let's say I'm a family now, and we're sitting down having this conversation with all this. I mean, you've already given some amazing things, I think, for families to just to be aware of. But what is it like? What can we do from our own homes and our own situations to actually be a part of the solution?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because especially when we're talking about something as massive as the ocean, and there's so many issues that are plaguing the ocean, between the plastics that are clogging up the seas, the nutrient runoffs that's coming from inland that's polluting our waterways, of course, climate change. Just briefly to catch everybody up on climate change so that the rest of this talk will make more sense. The climate is changing. The climate has always been changing. The problem now is that it's just changing at a faster rate than it ever has before. And when we're talking about climate, and particularly we're talking about our greenhouse gases, the amount of methane and carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. We're seeing more methane and carbon dioxide in our atmosphere in the last 100 years since human civilization has taken off than in any other time in our Earth's history. And we know that there is a direct link between our actions and why those numbers are increasing. So when we are flying a lot, when we are driving a lot, when we're producing a lot of plastics, or consuming a lot of gasoline, all of that contributes to more carbon dioxide and more methane in our atmosphere. When we're producing too much, the environment can't quite keep up. And so this is why we see our atmosphere, our air temperatures warming up, which is causing our water temperature to warm up. Interestingly, when water molecules expand, or when they heat up, they expand, and so they take up more volume. So I'm here in South Florida, for instance. Our high tides during the summer months are higher than in any other time of the year. And so we see a lot of coastal flooding as a result. Our sea levels are rising faster here than anywhere else. Climate change is also impacting our weather patterns. And so we've seen all of the fires that have taken place over in California, the year before, the brush fires in Australia. Poor Australia getting hit again, their coral reef getting hit by another bleaching event, which is a result of warm water temperatures. We're seeing climate change. The changing in our climate is also impacting our hurricanes. We're getting wetter storms. We're getting more droughts, harsher droughts. And over time, what we're going to see is that if we keep increasing the CO2 and methane in our atmosphere, humans are going to be, we'll be here. Our planet is not going to just poof, disappear, but our lives are going to be a whole lot harder. We're going to be dealing with less food resources because of the droughts, because of higher water events, higher flooding. We're going to see more parasites, more mosquitoes, more ticks. Life is just not going to be that great, as we see for increases. So this is why it's so important that we really pay attention to how our actions have an effect on the ocean in particular. And even when you're inside and you're inland, just like in Nemo, all drains end up in the sea. And this is very real. We do see that there's direct connections between inland waterways to the ocean. And so what happens inland does have also a greater impact on the rest of the world, on the rest of the globe. And I know it's so strange. It's so hard to wrap your head around that. Right. But it's true. It's a thing. So these are really very basic little things that I want to share with everybody on tips that action steps they can take at home today to help create what I like to call a better, bluer future for tomorrow for my own kid. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, one of the first things that people can do, we're going to actually make this even easier. We're going to go through some ABCs. A stands for adopt a plant-based diet. Now, I know, especially inland there in the Midwest, this might be a little harder for some than others. Places like Argentina, too, they love their meat. But, the problem with constantly consuming so much red meat is that, number one, it's actually bad for our own personal health. We see a lot of increase in disease as a result of the red meat in our systems. But when we're looking at cattle production, the way that a lot of these cattle farms or ranches are set up are to have lots of animals packed in a big space. And so the way that the cattle is produced, the feed that they're given, is actually causing a lot of gaseous disturbance in their bellies. And so there's more cattle farting and burping in the world. And when they do that, they're actually emitting methane. So cattle production is actually a huge methane contributor to our atmosphere. Now, if we just simply choose one day of the week, Meatless Monday, for instance, to not eat red meat, then we are buying less red meat, which means that ultimately there will be less red meat produced. And over time, we'll start to see those methane productions start dropping.
Yeah.
Along the same vein, there's actually been some really interesting studies, because it's not as though the cattle ranches don't know this, and there's many of them that actually are working towards, how can they produce greener production facilities. So one study actually looked into the feed that they were giving cattle, and what they found was that if we looked at seaweed as an alternative feed, and in particular kelp, which we see off the coast of Maine, over on the West Coast, this beautiful, really fast-growing seaweed. It's also really nutritious. When we just incorporate 5% of the diet of these cattle, we incorporate kelp into 5% of their diet, we actually saw that there was a reduction in methane production by 95%, which is huge.
That's
so
huge.
It's both hand in hand. It's not just our own responsibility, it's certainly the responsibility of big business and big corporations to also do their part to help minimize the impacts on our climate. But it's a really interesting study to know that there are ways around, and hopefully in the future we do start to see that the production of cattle is a greener production. And also along the same vein, when you do want to consume red meat, find a local farm to buy from. That way, another big problem with the cattle production is that the meat is traveling long distances. Trucks emit carbon dioxide, another problem for our climate.
Right.
But if we're from local farms, then they're usually run on a smaller scale. You're supporting small farmers, and the meat is probably going to be a lot healthier and tastier for you anyway.
Well, two things. First of all, I can imagine if you have boys, because I had boys, that if you get to talk about the gaseous, cows farting and burping, I'm having a feeling that that's going to be like a hit of a conversation anyway, just to have, for fun. But in terms of the plant-based diet, I recently, and I'm going to say in the last month, watched a show called The Game Changers about being vegan. And I think I'll probably land more vegetarian, but I do not miss meat at all. And I feel so much better, and my energy is up. And honestly, I wish I would have done it a long time ago. And it's not, yes, it's partially because of what you're talking about, and obviously the cruelty, there's so many reasons, right? But just like, if I just look at it from a pure health standpoint, I feel amazing by not having meat in my diet right now. I don't know that I'm going to say I'll never have it again, but it's going to be a rarity for me. I do not miss it. So anyway, just FYI for anybody watching, The Game Changers was probably one of the most, I thought, convincing things I'd ever watched, in terms of, I thought, you know what, I'm going to try it and see how I feel. And I feel amazing. So
right there you go. And that's a huge piece. A lot of people relate their lack of energy to not enough coffee, when in reality, it's food. You need more greens and water in your life.
Yep. So okay. So that's the first one. What's the second one?
All right, moving on. So another way that we can lessen our impact on the environment at home is to buy carbon offsets. So now we're talking about the letter B, buy carbon offsets. Let me show you what I mean. This has a lot to do with that. Okay, this is a mangrove plant, and we have these all over the southeast here. I'm gonna put mine down. I have my personal mangrove plant here that I keep. Mangroves are incredible plants. They're considered blue carbon sinks. And so what mangroves do for our atmosphere is, as they pull out the oxygen and the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, they are storing it in their trunks down into the roots, and the roots of mangrove trees actually are almost always submerged in water. And so now that carbon dioxide from the air gets stored below water, and that's actually where it remains undisturbed for hundreds of years. So plants like mangroves are an excellent way to act as like a sponge to help us remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So when you're buying carbon offsets, what that means is you're basically donating money to organizations that have programs that help them restore mangrove forests. So one example to give you, let me find it, yes. The Ocean Foundation's Seagrass Grow program is one of these. So when you donate money to this program, you're helping to plant seagrass beds, mangrove forests, and salt marshes in coastal areas. And all of these plants, all of this type of coastal restoration in an area where we're at the ocean-land interface, those are all the blue carbon sinks, which actually do an even better job at removing and storing carbon dioxide below the water line than terrestrial plants do. So when you're buying carbon offsets, you're investing in restoring these forests, and you're also offsetting your mileage when you're flying. So when we're buying carbon offsets, a really reason why people do it is because they want to really mitigate for all of the carbon dioxide that they used up while they were flying. Now, an interesting side effect of COVID is that very many of us have not been flying this year. And so when we look at those numbers, we actually see that the amount of carbon dioxide emissions that have been coming from planes this year has dropped as a result of our own actions of not flying as much. Right. So that has been an interesting side effect. But for those of you who do fly, and I'm personally somebody who loves to travel, it is really important then that you can mitigate your carbon dioxide emissions by donating to these kinds of programs.
Great.
Another thing about this real quick is that if you're interested, so to make an efficient road trip, if you drive 600 miles, so consider this, if your trip is about 600 miles, it is more efficient, less environmentally harmful to drive or take a train or take a bus to that destination than if you were to fly to that destination. So as we have the holidays coming up, if you are, trying to travel somewhere, consider driving.
Nice. Okay. Okay. So we are going to adopt more of a plant-based diet, maybe just meatless Mondays if you're not willing to do what I'm doing, but I would recommend it. And then we're going to buy carbon offsets, and the mangroves are one of the things that you really mentioned. And then the third one is?
Okay, consume sustainable seafood. Okay, I'm not saying eat wooden fish, but pay attention to the fish that you're eating. This is a big part of the conversation, is how can we become more conscious consumers? And a best way to do that is to educate yourself. So here's a tip. When you are looking at what kind of seafood to purchase to consume, look for seals on the bag or on the seafood that says MSC, Marine Stewardship Council, or it'll have a seal from an aquaculture organization. Those are indicators that the seafood that you're buying was bought in a way that's not only sustainable, to say that you're not depleting the population of seafood, but it's also done in a way that takes care of the fisher people who are also selling the seafood, buying or catching the seafood. There's a lot of really bad backstories to the seafood industry, and so there's a lot of very harmful seafood industries as a result. Again, not just to the fish, but to the people who are involved in the industry. So these MSC and aquaculture organizations do a really great job of certifying that seafood that you're eating is taken from a population that is healthy, that's caught in a way that's not harmful to the environment, and that's caught in a way that's not harmful to the people who are making the profits.
Okay.
Here's a really great example for everyone. What do you think? Wild caught versus farm raised salmon. Which is more environmentally friendly?
That's a good question. See, because I've heard both.
Exactly. Yeah. So let me debunk that.
Yeah, tell me what it is, for real.
If we want to protect wild populations of salmon, then we want to be eating wild salmon. Here's why. The majority of the wild salmon that is caught in the United States comes from Alaska. The fishery in Alaska is highly regulated by the United States. So much so, I've actually witnessed this. You know, salmon are really cool fish in that they will swim upstream into a lake to lay their eggs. And then as soon as they're done, they'll swim back downstream out into the ocean to finish the rest of their life. So there are fish that can live in both fresh and salt water. Very unusual. Mm-hmm. This actually makes it very easy for us then to regulate the population because there's somebody who has a job where they are stationed at the mouth of the river. So at that mouth, there's a barricade that only allows one salmon through at a time. And that person's job is to sit there and count every single salmon that comes out of the lake and goes out to the ocean. That's how highly regulated the fishery is. So we know exactly how many salmon are leaving and how many salmon are coming back. And when we see that those numbers are in balance, then we can continue the fishery. And that means that we're also supporting local fishermen. When we see that maybe there is an off balance there, then the regulators can very easily put in measures that will stop the fishery for a season or help the fishery come bouncing back. But because of those reasons, wild salmon is very highly regulated. And so we know that when we eat wild salmon, we actually are protecting wild populations. Farm-raised salmon, on the other hand, is not as highly regulated. There's still a lot of antibiotics that are used in the farm-raised hatcheries. There's potential that the farm-raised fish will make it out to the wild population spreading disease. And we see that actually the farm-raised salmon are not nearly as rich in omega-3s. They are more fatty. They don't taste as good. And they're just not as good for the environment.
All right, now we know. Now we know.
Yeah, finally, we're going to debunk that. Okay, another way that we can lessen our impact on the environment and help create a bluer backyard is to don't waste food. Take those dead bananas that you refuse to eat and throw them in the freezer. Don't throw them out. What happens here's a statistic for you that I'm surprised to come across when I found out about this. Americans throw out 40% of the food that we purchase. We are highly wasteful when it comes to our food. And the reason why this is so harmful is because when we put food into our garbage cans and they go out to landfills, that's where they're not getting composted. Instead, that food decays in the landfill, and as it decays, it is emitting methane. Again, methane is really bad greenhouse gas that's contributing to climate change, the worsening of climate change. So if we stop throwing out food and instead look for zero waste recipes, that's a really great way to reuse our food and lessen the amount of food that we're throwing out. I'm keeping my dead bananas. I put them in the freezer because then they make excellent bases for smoothies and margaritas.
Well, there's a selling point. That's funny. So my husband actually is good about that with the bananas, but we could do it with probably other stuff too. We've been so much better about not every time I go to the refrigerator, I'm like, what do I need to use in here before it, what can I make? Some concoction, right? that pulls in all this stuff that we have sitting here that didn't get used yet. So I've done so much better at that, but we have waste, but not nearly as much. Yeah.
Right. And again, the more mindful we are of these practices, the more we'll become aware of it and we'll actually start paying better attention to figuring out what we really can reuse.
Yep. Okay. So the last one that you share this is number 5.
So number 5, moving on to the letter E, we want to make an energy audit in our homes. And this is why I'm holding up a multi-outlet. I want everybody to do an energy audit, and for anything that they can, try and plug them into multi-outlets or surge protectors, because the benefit of this is that at the end of the day, or when you're leaving the day to go to work, you can simply unplug the multi-outlet and suddenly you don't have those devices utilizing ghost energy. We don't realize that everything that we leave plugged in at home is actually still pulling out energy, even though it's not actually on. And so you literally have to unplug devices in order to stop that electrical flow, that energy waste. So surge protectors, multi-outlets, make it really easy to do that. And also, when we're talking about another thing to look into as you're doing your energy audit around home is to look at your thermostat. So here in the winter months, you want to make sure that your thermostat is at the hottest, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And then maybe when you go to sleep or when you're not home, you can drop it even a little cooler than that. The opposite is true too. In the summer months, you want to leave your thermostat at 78 degrees Fahrenheit. And then when you're not home, make it a little warmer. I know at night it's uncomfortable to sleep in warm temperatures, but you want to make sure that your thermostat is in these most highly efficiently energy efficient settings as possible, because again, we're using a lot of energy, which also contributes to more greenhouse gases being emitted into our atmosphere. And so these very simple energy audits, look to see ways that you can save energy. Another surprising way that you can save energy that kids are going to love is that rather than washing your dishes by hand, you actually want to wash them using the machine. Use your dishwasher. There's a lot of energy.
I'm going to make my husband watch this because he always wants to wash them by hands. And I'm like, why don't we have a dishwasher? Let's just use it. So
yeah, we use a lot more water washing our dishes by hands than we do in our dishwasher.
There you go. All right. Beautiful. Well, like there's so much here. You know, we do a playbook after every show where we pull out 3 things. We're going to have like, 20 things on yours. So anyway, the highlights, because there's so much great stuff here. So if anybody joining us, like literally go back and watch this. There's so many cool ideas that you can sit down, talk about as a family, really wrap around. And I always say an idea is just an idea unless you do something with it. So put a plan together how your family can actually do these things. I love all of them. I mean, I actually think all of them are very doable and really important. So I think it's beautiful. So anyway, thank you so much. So what we do, because we are at that time. So when we close out the show, we always, and you're going to, I'm sure you could pull 1,000 of these, but like if you're going to leave one parting thought, which we call a drop of thought, right? What would be that parting dot that you would want to share?
I encourage everyone to find their water, find their nature, and spend more time outside. Go to those places where you feel alone, that you feel like you really can be in awe of the world around you. Go to those places that are quiet. Go to the places where you can really immerse yourself in nature, where reef safe sunscreen if you're in the ocean. But really get in there, take your family with you, and connect with one another. The best part about spending time, especially on water, but even more so when you're in remote places, is that we have no cell phone service, or you're not allowed to use your cell phone when you're in the water, right? So do whatever you can to disconnect from technology and find your nature.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. Real quick before we do, we could probably go on forever here, but I wanted to put up, this is, if you want to reach out and learn more about all of this that she's sharing, and I know you have on your website, ola'picreative.com, there's a way for them to even see some of your conversations with Paola, where you're actually covering all this stuff that we're talking about and so much more. So that's how you can reach out. And that's for those that might be listening, it's OLAPI creative.com. So OLAP as in Paul, I creative.com. So that's it. So jump out there. There's even more resources and information out there. And just one more thing, I'm going to I always close on the same dot, but just, you brought up something about getting out in nature, getting some sun. Yes, you don't want to go out and lay in the sun and, whatever, but get out in nature, because honestly, right now, just like as a side note, one of the main factors for people not doing well, and not to date the show, but with COVID, but with anything really, is they have low levels of vitamin D. We're not getting enough of it. I know I live in Ohio, so we don't get a lot of sun, but when it's sunny out, I'm out, and it's just time of year. Obviously in the summertime we do, but if you need to supplement with vitamin D, you should do that. But just FYI, she's bringing up a valuable point here about how important it is for us to get out in nature and actually soak in some of that sunshine as well. So thank you for being here. Amazing information. Really, really excited we did this. So I do close every show with my dot, which is my heart. That is that if we really really want to see change out in our world, then it starts with us, and it starts in our own homes with our own families first. Ripples don't flow in, they flow out. So if we want to be a part of the change, it starts with us, and we get to create that ripple. So thank you so much for being here, everyone. We have more great shows coming up, but if you want to tap in to connect with Paola, go ahead and reach out to her at the ola'picreative.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to share this. Enjoy. Remember, we're water people.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, I'm going to get me one of those. Take care.